It always starts like this. Not with a scream, not with a fight, but with a text. Mom's not doing so well. That was it. 5 words from Lexi, my sister who hadn't spoken to me in over 2 years. And just like that, my heart clenched. Not because I believed her, but because I knew her. Lexi doesn't send texts unless she wants something. Not love, not forgiveness, leverage. I stood there in the kitchen, phone in hand, the sunlight pooling on the floor like nothing had changed. But everything inside me was bracing for a storm. I could hear Evan in the next room. He was giggling, loud, joyful, free. 7 years old and already building spaceships out of cereal boxes. To him, laughter was oxygen. To my family, though, laughter was noise, disruption, weakness. I hadn't brought Evan back to that house in 2 years, not since the incident, the betrayal. They called it a misunderstanding. But when someone drains your college fund without permission to pay for your sister's liposuction and veneers, it's not confusion, it's clarity. I cut them off that day. No calls, no visits, and definitely no more money. But now they dangled the one thing that could still pierce my armor. Mom might be dying. I paced the floor, phone still glowing in my hand. No apology, no remorse, just a quiet little landmine. I didn't owe them a thing. And yet, there was still a voice inside me whispering, but what if? What if she was telling the truth? What if I ignored it and regretted it for the rest of my life? I glanced back at Evan. He was spinning in a circle, dizzy from joy. My heart ached. Could I risk bringing his light into their darkness? Would I be protecting him by staying away, or betraying myself by doing so? And then, with trembling fingers, I typed, "Okay, Evan and I will come this weekend." Not because I forgave them, not because I forgot, but because somewhere deep in me, hope hadn't died. And that's the most dangerous thing about hope. It makes you believe in things you've seen burn before. Evan didn't ask questions. He never does when he's excited. The moment I told him, "Hey buddy, we're going to visit Grandma and Grandpa this weekend," his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. He spun in circles in the living room. His tiny feet danced across the floor. He grabbed a stuffed dinosaur and gave it a ridiculous cowboy voice. "Yee-haw! We're going to the country!" he shouted. I forced a smile. His joy was contagious, but I couldn't ignore the pit in my stomach. 2 years is a long time. To a 7-year-old, it's half a lifetime. He had no memory of the tension, the silence, the subtle barbs hidden behind compliments at the dinner table. He only remembered the smell of Grandma's apple pie and how Grandpa used to whistle old songs while watering the lawn. I didn't want to steal that from him, not yet. So I packed his bag that night, his mismatched socks, his sketchbook, his worn-out sneakers with the Velcro strap that kept peeling off. He insisted on bringing his toy microphone for storytelling, he said proudly. My heart ached. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. I whispered to myself, "It's only 2 days. Just 2. We'll be in and out." But deep down, I knew better. You don't just walk into a house that once broke you and expect it not to slice you again. Still, I was betting everything on the hope that this time, for Evan's sake, maybe they'd pretend to be decent human beings for 48 hours. That was my gamble, a mother's gamble. The driveway felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just grown. Not taller, just heavier, with years of buried resentment that no suitcase could hold. Evan was bouncing in the back seat, pressing his nose against the window. "Are we there yet?" he giggled, his joy still intact. For now. We parked. I stepped out first. Just standing in front of that house made my spine stiffen. The curtains hadn't changed. The porch light still flickered like it always did. It was the same house that raised me and erased me. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Lexi. Same smirk, same eyes that scanned for weakness like a heat-seeking missile. She took one look at Evan, his mismatched socks, his curls tangled from the car nap, and without missing a beat, she laughed. Wow, raising a clown, huh? It wasn't the words, it was the tone, that venom-laced chuckle that only sisters know how to deliver. Evan blinked. His smile faltered, unsure. I forced a breath and responded lightly, "Oh, he's just excited." Lexi rolled her eyes. Sure. She'd turned around without inviting us in. Just like that, we were already unwelcome. Evan tugged my sleeve. "Did I do something weird, Mommy?" he whispered. I knelt beside him. "No, baby, you're perfect." But in my chest, that familiar ache returned. The one I thought I'd left behind when I left this house 2 years ago. And this time, they weren't just going to break me. They were starting on him too. Dinner smelled like nostalgia and tension. The kitchen looked exactly the same. Same floral curtains, same chipped tile under the sink, same heavy silence disguised as family warmth. We sat around the table, Evan wedged between me and the edge, his feet barely touching the floor. He kicked his shoes off, wiggled his toes, and whispered, "This feels like Thanksgiving." I smiled. Across from me, my father scrolled through his phone, his reading glasses slipping down his nose. My mother placed a steaming bowl of potatoes in front of him without a word. Lexi popped open a soda with a hiss. No one said grace. Then came the gravy boat. My mom set it down with a clink, shaped like a clunky porcelain swan with a curled neck. Evan gasped, "Mom, it looks like a spaceship!" His face lit up like a flashlight under a blanket. He giggled and made rocket sounds, zooming the gravy boat gently across the table. I laughed. It was adorable. It was harmless. But then I saw it. The look on my father's face. Disdain. Not confusion, not annoyance, pure disdain. Without looking up from his plate, he muttered, "Kid can't sit still, just like his mother. All noise, no value." Time paused. I blinked. Evan's laughter stopped mid-giggle. He glanced at me, unsure. His tiny hand slid off the gravy boat like he'd just touched something forbidden. Lexi didn't react. My mother stirred her peas. No one said a word, except the thud in my chest. I reached under the table and squeezed Evan's hand. He looked down, shrinking. That was the moment I realized they weren't going to change. Not for me, not for Evan, not even for decency. That night, I didn't sleep. The guest room smelled like old lavender and something else, something sharp, metallic. Memory. Evan lay beside me, curled up under the blanket, one hand holding his toy microphone like a security blanket. His chest rose and fell softly. Peaceful on the outside, but I saw it. That flicker, that hesitation in his eyes at dinner, the way his shoulders had drooped after my father's words. I stared at the ceiling fan, watching it spin like a slow, indifferent clock. Time was moving, but nothing inside me felt forward. What was I doing here? What had I done? I told myself it was just a weekend, 2 days. I told myself I came back for my mother. But the truth is, I came back with hope. And now I hated myself for it, because it wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just my past being disrespected. It was my son's present being poisoned. I had walked him into the very place that taught me I was too much, too loud, too wrong. And I thought I could shield him from it with a smile, with small talk, with 2 days of pretending. I turned my head, watched the moonlight pool across Evan's cheek. He looked so small, so unaware that the same forces that had once bent me into silence were now hovering over him like shadows. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't wake him, so I cried instead, quietly, into the pillow. Not for me, not this time. I cried for the part of Evan that had already learned to doubt his own joy. It happened fast, too fast for my mind to catch up, but just slow enough for my heart to break in real time. A scream, high, shrill, not a tantrum, not a bad dream, a scream that only comes from real pain. I bolted up in bed, heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. I didn't even grab my slippers. I just ran. The hallway spun. My feet barely touched the floor. And then I saw it. Evan. On the kitchen floor. Hands clutching his mouth. Blood soaking through his fingers. I dropped to my knees. "Evan, baby, what happened?" He didn't answer. He was sobbing. Guttural, trembling cries. Tears mixed with blood streaming down his chin. Standing above him, arms crossed, eyes cold, was Lexi. She didn't flinch, didn't reach for him, didn't even look guilty. "He wouldn't shut up," she said, like she was talking about a dog barking too loud. "I told him 3 times. Then he screamed in my ear. I tapped him. I looked at Evan again. His front tooth was cracked, split down the center, dangling like a loose thread. I couldn't breathe. I scooped him into my arms, blood on my shirt, his tiny body shaking against mine. Behind me, I heard the soft sound of a coffee mug clinking. My mother, turning the corner, sipping her drink. She glanced at us and said, "Lexi's got a short fuse, that's all. Don't raise a loudmouth if you want peace in someone else's house." Someone else's house? I looked at her stunned. Evan whimpered in my arms. Then came the final blow from the living room recliner. My father's voice floated out without even looking up. "He's useless, like his mother always has been." My knees buckled, but I held on to Evan. I didn't scream, I didn't curse. I just stood, grabbed my purse from the counter, and I left. No shoes, no words, just fire. The drive to urgent care was only 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Evan sat beside me in the back seat. I didn't want him alone back there, not after what just happened. He had a towel pressed to his mouth, blood still soaking through. His little hands were trembling, his eyes lost. He wasn't crying loud anymore. He was crying quiet, the kind of crying that comes after the shock settles, when a child starts asking questions, not out loud, but inside themselves. And then, softly, he looked up at me and whispered, "Did I do something bad, Mommy?" I nearly swerved off the road. My fingers clenched the steering wheel. My jaw tightened. I looked at him through the rearview mirror. His face was pale. There was blood on his sleeve. But what broke me was the look in his eyes, like joy was something punishable. I pulled over, right there on the side of the road. I turned around in my seat and grabbed his hand. "No, sweetheart," I said, voice shaking. "You didn't do anything wrong." I bit my lip to keep from crying. Then I added, "You were just being happy," and the world had punished him for it. Back at the house, the silence felt louder than the scream. I had driven Evan straight to urgent care, held his hand through the x-rays, listened as the doctor said the tooth had cracked clean to the root, that it would have to be pulled. Evan didn't cry this time. He just asked for a sticker. A dinosaur one. I gave it to him, smiled, died a little inside. Now, hours later, I stood in the hallway of the house that raised me. And this time, I wasn't holding Evan. I was holding something heavier. Clarity. The smell of reheated food drifted from the kitchen. Voices murmured. No one had called to ask if Evan was okay. I stepped into the kitchen. My mother was at the counter, stirring her coffee like nothing had happened, steam curling over the rim. Calm, casual, cold. She saw me and said, "Lexi's always had a short fuse. You know how she is." Then, without even meeting my eyes, "It's just a baby tooth." A shrug, a sip, a dismissal, as if my son's cracked tooth, his blood on the floor, was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, a broken toy, a noise they didn't want to hear. I stood there frozen. Then, from the living room, my father's voice drifted in, lazy, detached. "He's useless, like his mother, always has been." It hit like a hammer. I almost forgot how sharp his words could be. But this time, he wasn't stabbing me. He was stabbing Evan, a 7-year-old, whose only crime was joy. I didn't say a word, because I knew there was no fixing this. There was only ending it. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't even breathe loud enough to notice. I just moved. One step at a time, past the hallway with the crooked picture frame, past the stairs where I once sat for hours as a child, past the memories that were never really mine to begin with. Evan was limp in my arms, his little head resting on my shoulder, breathing shallow, tired. I could still taste iron in the air, his blood, my rage. I stopped by the counter, picked up my purse, keys, phone, that's it. Behind me, no one moved. No apology, no questions. Just silence, the kind that comes when people believe they've won. I opened the front door. The wind was sharp, the sky a pale gray. I stepped outside, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back. I didn't slam the door, didn't curse, didn't say, "You'll regret this," because I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving on fire. And they had no idea what was coming. The first thing I did when we got home wasn't cry. It wasn't even tend to my own wounds. It was paperwork, because I had finally seen it, not just who they were, but what they would always be. I sat at my kitchen table, Evan asleep on the couch with gauze still in his mouth, and I pulled out my laptop. Banking, medical, legal. I went line by line. They were still listed on my emergency contact forms, still had power of attorney from years ago, still had access to things I had forgotten I ever gave. That ended now. Within hours, I had revoked every right they had to speak for me or for Evan. Power of attorney, canceled. Medical proxy, gone. Signature authority at the bank, removed. Access to Evan's school, blocked. Family contact file, deleted. I made copies, printed everything, stamped, notarized. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I signed. Then I filed the paperwork for a restraining order. They wouldn't be able to come near Evan, not 500 feet, not a school function, not a grocery store, nothing. And the best part? They wouldn't see it coming, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. And that made all the difference. I rang the doorbell, once, and waited. The last time I stood on this porch, I left barefoot, with my son bleeding in my arms. But this time, I wasn't holding Evan. I was holding something else. Justice. The door creaked open. Lexi. Same smug grin. But this time, it didn't sting. Not even a little. "Well, look who came crawling back," she smirked. I smiled, soft, controlled, dangerous. "Just here to talk." She raised a brow, but stepped aside. I walked in. Same furniture, same heavy air, but everything felt different, because I was different. In the kitchen, my dad sat at the table watching an old clip of his retirement speech. My mom was microwaving something and humming off-key. "Nice of you to show," my dad muttered, never looking up. I didn't sit. I didn't move toward them. I stayed right where I was, opened my bag, and pulled out a stack of sealed envelopes. Thick, heavy, final. I placed them on the table. 1, 2, 3. My mom turned confused. "What's this?" I spoke clearly. No tremble, no apology. Power of attorney revoked. Bank access removed. Medical proxy gone. Emergency contact erased. Lexi let out a short, scoffing laugh. "Oh, is this one of your dramatic monologues again?" I turned to her, calm as ice. "No, this is my last conversation with you." She blinked. My dad narrowed his eyes. "You say this every year." I nodded. But this year, I brought proof. I reached back into my bag and pulled out one last envelope. Thicker, heavier, red sealed. I held it in my hand, let the silence stretch. They were watching now, really watching. Lexi sat forward. My mother froze. My father finally looked up from his tablet. I placed it gently on the table. Let it sit there, like a grenade with no pin. "What's that?" my mom asked, voice tight. I looked her in the eye. A full report. Photos of Evan's injury, screenshots of texts, Audio of Lexi saying he needed to be taught a lesson. Audio of my mother saying he was just visiting, not family. And transcripts of that slur, of useless, of like his mother. I nodded toward the envelope. That one's for your church. Then I pulled out a second identical copy. This is going to the country club board. Lexi's mouth dropped open. My mother paled. My dad stood up halfway. You wouldn't, his voice cracked. I didn't raise mine. I didn't scream, I said softly. I didn't destroy you. I just erased you. Silence. Then I added, your portrait's already gone from the church lobby. Lexi slammed her drink down. You spiteful little... But I was already walking to the door. Calm, clear, done. And behind me, the whole house finally went quiet. It started small. A missing name from a newsletter, a deleted photo from the church bulletin board. Then came the bigger cracks. The country club board issued a formal statement. Due to conduct inconsistent with our values, the family of Robert and Diane Blank will no longer hold honorary status. That same week, their photos disappeared from the website. Their names, once bold in gold script, were just gone. No explanation, no drama, just erased. Lexi's social media shifted. First a few unfollows, then full-on silence. Even her ride-or-die besties stopped tagging her in posts. She tried to post something cute and inspirational. It got 2 likes. One was her own. The house didn't burn. No one shouted in the street. There were no front-page scandals. But inside that house, everything was cracking. I didn't post a thing, didn't gloat, didn't leak screenshots, didn't leave vague book quotes. I just lived. I made Evan pancakes shaped like stars. We painted tiny ceramic dragons together. He started humming again. And I watched as their world slowly collapsed without a single headline. Because sometimes the most devastating revenge doesn't make noise, it makes absence. It came 3 weeks later, a text from Lexi. Please, I need to talk to you. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit, unread, unanswered. Hours passed, then another. I lost my job. They said they didn't want the bad press. Still, I didn't respond. She tried again. Just talk to me, please. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was just mad. I snapped. Then came the guilt strategy. I had to sell my car. I'm walking to work now. Well, I was, until they fired me too. And finally, he's just a kid. I didn't know I'd hurt him like that. Please tell him I'm sorry. Please. But she wasn't messaging Evan. She was messaging me. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about control, and she had lost it. I didn't block her. I didn't reply. I didn't say, I told you so. I just let the silence answer for me. Because some lessons you don't explain. You just let them echo. The first time my mother called, I let it go to voicemail. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wonder. I just watched the screen light up with the name that used to mean comfort. And now, just noise. The voicemail came through 10 seconds later. It's me. Did you really have to go that far? That was it. No. How's Evan? No. Are you okay? No. I'm sorry. Did you really have to go that far? It wasn't guilt. It wasn't concern. It was image control. She wasn't upset about what had happened to my son. She was upset about what people were now saying about her. That was the moment I realized. They never loved us loudly. They just loved being looked at. They didn't call to apologize. They called because their world was cracking, and they wanted me to patch the walls again. But this time, I wasn't the plaster. I was the earthquake. So I didn't call back. Not out of revenge, not out of hate, out of clarity. Because I finally understood I was asking for something they were never built to give. The room smelled like paint and safety scissors. A soft hum of children focusing brushes tapping against little plastic palettes. No shouting, no judgment, just color. Evan didn't speak much the first week. He held his crayon like it might shatter. He glanced over his shoulder every few minutes, still expecting something cruel, something loud. I didn't push. I sat outside behind the glass door. I let him have this space, his space. Week 2, he started drawing circles, big, messy, overlapping. Not perfect, but his. And then on week 3, he giggled. I didn't even hear it at first. I saw it. His shoulders bounced, his mouth opened, and then came the sound, a soft, light giggle, the kind of laugh that's born from safety. The teacher looked up, smiling. I froze, hand halfway to my coffee. My son laughed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't long, but it was enough to crack something inside me. He looked up at me through the glass, smiled, and I smiled back with everything I had, because after all that was taken, his joy came back on its own. Not forced, not staged, not borrowed, just Evan being Evan again. I still had the old drives, photos, videos, holidays, birthdays, back when I thought love meant proximity. I opened the folders like opening a wound. There was my father, arms crossed behind Evan's first birthday cake. My mother, clapping with a smile that never touched her eyes. Lexi holding Evan like a bag of groceries. They looked like a family, but I knew better now. They posed with us, but they never stood for us. And now I had a choice. Keep them and keep bleeding, or cut them and finally heal. Click, delete, another click, trash emptied. One by one, I erased the ghosts that had fed off our memories. And when it was done, only Evan remained. His baby pictures, his drawings, his lopsided birthday hats, his missing front tooth, and one folder at the top, The Boy Who Laughs. That was our story now. Not what they built, not what they broke, what we made, together, from the rubble. There was no ribbon cutting, no press release, just an open door and a title on the wall, The Boy Who Laughs. People came in quietly, teachers, friends. Evan's art teachers from the community center, the nurse who'd held my hand at urgent care. There were photos, Evan smiling with missing teeth, Evan painting rockets and suns, Evan laughing mid-spin, blurry with motion. And then near the back, a small frame with a single line. This is what joy looks like when you refuse to let cruelty win. No plaques for grandparents, no curated by Lexi, no black and white wedding photos in vintage frames, no trace of them at all, just color. Just light, just Evan. I watched from a distance, didn't give a speech, didn't need to, because this wasn't a stage, this was sanctuary. And then, as people gathered near the last canvas, Evan turned around. He saw me, his eyes sparkled, and he laughed, not a giggle, a full, radiant laugh, clear, bright, unapologetic, and the whole room smiled. We didn't just erase them, we replaced them with everything they never were. She didn't send a letter, no apology request, no speech, just a postcard. Front, a full-color photo from the exhibit. Evan in mid-laugh, hands covered in paint, joy splashing off him like light. Back, no message, no return address, just the title in printed text, The Boy Who Laughs. No dear mom, no I hope this finds you well, no you missed this, because they already knew. They saw the photo. They saw what they had thrown away. They didn't lose her to rebellion. They lost her to clarity. To a single decision, never again. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to block their number. This postcard said more than 100 angry texts ever could. And when they flipped it over, what stared back wasn't just a child's joy. It was a life that no longer included them. It was after bedtime. The museum lights were off. The world was quiet. They were curled up on the old green couch, the one she almost sold during the worst months, the one Evan said felt like a spaceship. His head rested on her chest, his breathing steady, calm, and then so softly it nearly melted into the night, he whispered, "Thanks for picking me, Mommy." Her eyes filled before she could even smile. She kissed his forehead, pulled him closer. I always picked you, baby. I just didn't know how to say no to them before. That was it. No grand finale, no music swelling, just truth, just softness. Just a mother and her son wrapped in the safety she built from the ruins they left behind. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even closure. It was belonging. And that was louder than anything they'd ever said to her. People always ask, why didn't you scream? Why didn't you expose them? Why not ruin them like they tried to ruin you? I smile, because I don't need revenge. They had all the chances. They had love. They had my silence. But they chose cruelty. And cruelty doesn't need to be punished. It punishes itself. I didn't destroy my family. They did that all on their own. All I did was take the ashes and write a better ending. One where my son laughs freely. One where my love isn't treated like a burden. One where I finally learned how to say no, not out of hate, but out of love, for Evan, and for the woman I've become. That's not revenge. That's clarity. That's peace. That's justice without ever raising my voice. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to fight back with fists or fury, but to walk away, to say enough, and to build something better from the wreckage. This story reminds us just because someone is family doesn't mean they have a right to your peace. You are allowed to choose joy. You are allowed to protect your child. And above all, you are allowed to rewrite your ending. Even if the world thinks you're supposed to stay silent, you don't have to. Because your voice matters, your boundaries matter, and your healing is valid. If this story moved you, if you believe in love that protects, in justice without noise, and in healing that begins with one brave no, then subscribe to our channel. Here at Pieces of Soul, we tell the stories that hurt, but also heal. Stories of mothers who choose better. Stories of silence that speak louder than screams. Stories that might just change the way you see your own family. Tap that subscribe button, leave a comment, and don't forget your story matters too.